Namaste, welcome to Satsang. So Satsang is for the direct realization and also then coming to live from that core of our being. There is another aspect to us that is completely different to what we think it is. And thinking about it isn't going to help us to actually experience it. So Satsang is really to take apart the ideas, firstly to experience what you actually are, and then to take apart the ideas that are seemingly blocking your experience and living as that. And mostly all teachers really teach two basic paths, and one is to experience what is really true and to come to live as that more and more, and then to basically look at where we're not being that authentic self. And really the other pathway is to go straight into the mind, to understand the mind, to look at why it works the way it does, why it's also incapable of actually seeing the truth, and eventually to come to understand what are the thoughts that are keeping my mind in this dysfunctional state. Most of us come to satsang with a head full of junk, so much so, like I was when I first started, that there isn't really any space for any kind of rational, logical thought. It's just constant noise, punctuated by the occasional moment where I was able to actually rationally use my mind. So I want to focus on this book, to read from this book today, which is Transcending the Mind. And the subtitle really is the key. Some disassembly required. I found in my own pathway that I had to look at a lot of the assumptions of mind. And it's actually at the bottom, it says how to take apart your noisy mind. So if you have a fascination with taking things apart and seeing how they work, you can do that with your mind, and you don't have to put it back together again at the end, unless you want to. So this book was written really to look at, there's basically 6 or 7 thoughts that are that we have believed that are not true, and these are the basis of the proliferation of all of our nonsensical thoughts that come on a daily basis. Repetitious thoughts, thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future, thoughts about what if, and basically all of the noise that we'd like to get rid of in our head is being experienced because of these few thoughts. And if we really look at each one in turn, that is enough to begin to undo the assumptions of mind that keep it dysfunctional. So we're going to look at each one of these in stages, and we're going to examine each one. There are lots of examples from real life students in this book, but I'm not going to read the examples because of the time delay, the time factor involved in that. I'm going to read the basic stages, and then we'll go from there. Okay. I'll start with chapter 1, which is the introduction. Most of humanity is lost in the illusion that they are their minds, that whatever their mind says, they must automatically believe because it is them. We may say my mind and my thoughts, but few of us can actually see that these are appearing in us and not actually what we are. So we'll know how much we're still believing that thought, that idea that I am my mind, by the automatic nature with which we seem to have to listen to thoughts when they come. If you clearly and deeply know that you're not your mind, you're not your body, that those are happening and they're not actually affecting you, then it's a choice in each moment whether to listen to thought or not. This book is offered so that we may finally and fully transcend the mind, and so we can understand the actual process of transcending mind. Information about the process and how to move to the next stage helps us to soften our resistance, because we begin to see that every awakened being has travelled the road we are on. Everyone must walk this path right to the end, and nobody is exempt, not even the Buddha. So what we're going to look at today in these assumptions, and probably next Monday's Satsang, is the same assumptions that every single awakened being has come to see is not true. And these are like splinters in our mind that cause us pain, cause us to feel divided, cause us to experience the world as a separate being. And really undoing those, looking at them, seeing if they're actually true, is going to quieten the mind down so that you can see what you already are. So it's kind of the backwards way to what I'm normally pointing at, which is find out what you are first, and then see if what you thought you were was true. So this pathway really suits a lot of beings. If you have a very noisy analytical mind and you like to take things apart. As human beings, we evolve spiritually by learning new information, questioning its truth, and then applying it. At the end of this process, we become what we were previously reading about. We are the living truth, and not just holding it in our heads as more book knowledge. Our mind and body are always in a seeming process of becoming ever clearer, brighter, and happier manifestations of the true self. Our unmanifested nature is ever perfect, total, and complete. With this book, you'll be able to take any particular mind pattern that is happening for you right now and understand it, work it backwards, and end up in the awakened state as the perfection that you are. This book is groundbreaking in that it brings together each stage of transcendence of the mind in clear steps that are easily explained. Examples of everyday events, their emotional and mental responses, and how to use them to totally transcend the mind are given also. These examples are from real students as they are growing on the pathway. Each person reading this book and applying what they learn will be able to check their progress by the examples in this book and the explanations. Also, you'll be able to assess your own progress through the feeling of release, opening, and greater peace each time you progress to the next chapter. The processes in this book are available to everyone, and it does not matter if you've done any spiritual practice before or lots of it. The processes are applicable to anyone who has an interest in moving beyond mind. You do not need to have any previous knowledge of spiritual traditions, cultures, or the various pathways at all. In fact, this book may work best for those who are totally open and able to simply read, apply, and transcend. You're greatly encouraged to read all the chapters in this book at least once. This is especially so even if the first few chapters seem to be quite basic and you have advanced beyond them in your spiritual practice. This is because it will help you to see that at each stage there is a particular set of opposites or dualities to be transcended. You do not need to understand this at all, but reading the chapters in order will help your consciousness to understand the process it is going through and advance to the next level much more easily. So simply to hear what these assumptions are that are not true is going to begin a process of investigation inside, if you allow it. To come to see where we're still living from these assumptions is going to immediately start to bring you out of it. Transcending mind is like peeling away the layers of an onion, and as you learn how to peel back each layer, you become more adept at the next one. The journey becomes quicker and easier, even at the end of small and possibly tricky layers. In the end, you are left with the nothing inside the onion, the formlessness or awareness that you are and always were. Transcending the mind is a journey from here to here. You are already this pure awareness, but we must peel back the layers of the mind that obscure the true light that we are and live as that experientially. Chapter 2, Pathway of Mind and Understanding. There are many pathways to truth or awakening, such as the pathway of heart or through deep self-inquiry. Many pathways stress the importance of meditation and contemplation also. These are all very useful tools and are encouraged, although in this book we will be working with our mind to begin to understand the roots of our suffering and how to unravel it. Each mind pattern we have is like a woven thread hanging loose from the garment of the mind or egoic sense of self. If we know exactly where to pull the thread, we can unravel the whole thing in a relatively short space of time. If we can begin to see that everyone has these patterns, then they are actually there to help you, then we will be able to be much more confident and successful in letting them go. The pathway of mind is really only a process of actually deeply taking a look at our mind and asking why it works the way it does. So, how many of us actually really look at our mind and question why it's so noisy? Why is it so dysfunctional? Why is it not able to go back into silence after we've finished using it? Why are we not able to use our mind consciously and by choice? If you begin to look at mind this way, instead of what most of us are doing, which is to push it away, to wish it would stop, how can it stop talking if its thoughts that it's generating are based on some assumptions that we haven't actually examined within our own self? It's like complaining that the telly's too loud and yet not turning the volume down or switching it off. You know, there's something that we can do to accept our mind, to come to understand it, and in that it will begin to go quiet all by itself. The goal of self-realization is not to quieten the mind, it's to see what you really are. But some people, I noticed along the path, prefer to take their mind apart first, and then when that's done, the silence of their real being is just stunningly obvious. Understanding leads to acceptance, which will in turn lead to dissolving of the repetitive mind patterns that cause us so much suffering. Most of us spend our time consciously or unconsciously resisting mind, wishing it would quieten down or stop altogether. This only serves to increase the noise it tends to make. Please note that when I use the word mind or ego, I mean the aspect of our mind which is somewhat dysfunctional, repetitive, doubting, judging and fearing, etc. It is this aspect of our mind that we would like to dissolve and transcend, and not the useful, functional aspect of mind that reminds us that we have left the oven on, or that we're going to be late for work if we don't leave now. This healthy aspect of mind will still be available after you fully awaken to your true self and live in and as the freedom that you are. In fact, you'll be able to access your mind whenever you want or need to use it rather than being used by it. This pathway will be particularly useful if you have an extremely noisy mind or an overly analytical mind and find it challenging to sit and meditate, which is probably all of us really. I know it was for me when I first started. In this pathway, we are using the faculties of the mind to aid in its own dissolution. Each person's mind already has the wish to come to rest as the effortless self, and will do so when given the right information. Just as a tiny splinter of wood can go unseen in your finger for a very long time and yet cause a great deal of pain, so too can the wrong ideas cause unrest and unease within your own mind. It is like an itch you cannot scratch, or a wound that keeps on opening and never fully heals. All we are going to do with this book and these processes is give the mind the ability to see what the wrong ideas are finally. With that information, we can finally come to see what has been causing our own pain and choose to move beyond it. Follow each chapter and apply what you read completely, and only move on to the next chapter when you feel an experiential shift has occurred and you feel a sense of openness or lightening in your being. This is very important because it will show you that you have transcended the particular level of consciousness around that particular mind pattern you are working on. As you apply the processes in the chapters on one mind pattern, you'll begin to see how easily all the other patterns can dissolve too. So our noisy, dysfunctional mind, our egoic sense of self, is like a house of cards. And when we know where to pull, then the whole thing can fall down. Making a molehill out of a mountain. At first, the idea of undoing all these mind patterns can seem like a mountain to climb with no equipment. But as you begin to systematically undo each pattern, it becomes faster and easier. Each time you transcend a barrier, a belief, or block, you gain access to some energy that has been tied up in a thought loop, so it gets quicker, easier, and exponentially more powerful. It soon becomes obvious that if you undo just a few mind patterns, then at some point the whole thing will collapse and there will be only silence and peace. You'll come to see there is already peace and silence, but it may appear to be hidden under the noise of the mind. Each time you look at a mind pattern, you will notice it clearer, simpler, and easier to see where your energy has been tied up in it. Each time you are clearer, more aware, and much more powerfully focused. Each time you'll be less distractible by mind. And at some point, like a house of cards, it will all collapse and you can simply be yourself without the inner journalist obsessively commenting on everything that happens to you. You'll begin to fall in love with the simplicity of this pathway and the ease of the steps that have a simple and logical process. You may also begin to fall in love with the reward of more peace, stillness, and happiness for transcending each mind pattern. Our mind will tell us that it is total enlightenment or bust, that unless we let go of every single mind pattern, then we'll never be happy. On the contrary, what we will find is that each time we let go, each time we investigate a belief or question an assumption, we'll actually achieve a new level of consciousness each and every time. We'll find that the effort is worth it and that we are living a happier life every time that we apply this. There are immediate and tangible benefits to applying this, and we may even find that we reach a stage that we are so happy that we don't even care anymore about awakening or enlightenment. From this point on, you'll always have the tools within your grasp to handle anything that life throws at you. That is the greatest of all confidence. Let's get started. So chapter 3 is called The Anatomy of a Mind Pattern. In this chapter, we are going to start from the end and show the whole process. In this way, our consciousness will already be starting to let go as we'll begin to feed it the information that it needs. In effect, we'll see the whole roadmap for the journey and the territory we're going to cover so we know what to bring along. Before we lay out the stages of transcending a mind pattern, also called vasanas or latent tendencies of the mind, I'll describe each stage in general, and then we'll take a look at one stage in detail in each of the next chapters. We'll also take a quick look at the false ideas that we must still be believing at each stage. Step 1. The trigger event in the world. Something or someone acts or speaks in a certain way that causes an inner response within us of great emotion. We blame that person or circumstance for upsetting us, and we try our hardest to change them. So this could be anything that happens in your world. It could be a lack of something that you feel you need. It could be another being saying or doing something that seems to impact you. It could be something that's seemingly out of your control. anything at all, and hopefully I don't need to give too many examples of trigger events. I think we're all fairly familiar with them. So the false idea here is, I can change the outside world to get what I want and to make me feel better. Now, I can guarantee that most of us are still doing this in some area. Even when we're quite awake, we will still be trying to change the outer world, trying to change our reflection. All of this out here is your reflection, so trying to change it is not going to get you anywhere. It's like standing in front of a mirror and trying to change the reflection you see in the glass by tapping on the glass. It's not going to work. So in these later chapters, we'll go through how to undo these ideas. This is just a summary of the stages. Step 2, the inner response. With a little inner searching, we can come to see that the trigger event is not really what is upsetting. Rather, it is the inner response of negative, repetitive nonsense thoughts caused by the trigger that's causing us to suffer, and we may try to make it stop. The false idea here is, I can do something with these thoughts to make them go away. I can reject them or accept them. So thoughts are just happening to us, and there is absolutely nothing we can do to change those thoughts directly. Coming to recognize that there is nothing we can do is going to give us some distance from those thoughts, and they won't seem to impact us personally. Step 3, the emotional charge. In time, we will come to see that both the trigger event and the inner response are symptoms of an underlying emotional charge from an emotion we have not allowed ourselves to feel as yet. We must allow ourselves the time and space to actually feel our emotions fully so that the energy of them may dissipate. False idea here is, if I don't allow myself to feel this emotion, it will go away and I won't have to deal with it. Also, if I do allow myself to feel this emotion, it will overwhelm me. So these are the ideas that are behind all of our resisting of our own emotions. The idea that if I ignore it, it will go away, which is just the exact polar opposite of what occurs. And also, if I do allow myself to feel it, it's going to overwhelm me and become too much. Again, that is the direct polar opposite of what actually occurs when we allow the emotion. Stage 4, the assumptions of mind. We can see in this stage that all negative emotions are the result of some deeply rooted beliefs about ourselves that we have not wanted to see consciously. These beliefs are thoughts that have been believed so often that we never question them or their truth anymore. They come from our environment, our programming, and our karma. False idea. These beliefs about me are true, and I am unworthy, guilty, not good enough, or not safe. It is so painful to think about them that all I can do is bury them deep in my consciousness. So this idea has been deeply believed at some point within all of us. What I think and feel about myself is true. And this thought then never, ever, for most human beings, gets questioned ever again. Our entire existence, we may go through our whole life feeling that we're not good enough or we're not safe. Stage 5, the belief in separation. In this stage, we come to see that all these deep-rooted beliefs would not be possible if it were not for the fact that we firmly believe that we are a separate person, or that we are this body and this mind only. Only once we believe that we are the body can we pick up all these other beliefs as mine also. We begin to see that there really is only one belief to work on to undo all of the mind's insanity. False idea. I really am a separate person, alone in time and space, making my way through life trying to survive. When this body dies, so will I. Stage 6, the belief in otherness. In this stage, we may have seen many times that we are not really a separate person, rather that we are formlessness itself. Although we have seen this, we may not have fully digested the meaning of this, and can still have a tendency to see other people, to relate to others as if they were separate too. We must begin to see that if we are not separate, then neither are they. Time and time again, I hear people say that they've recognized that they're not a separate being. And then their very next statement is about a problem they're having with another being, another thing, or a lack of another thing. So it just needs to be deeply digested what it means if you're not actually separate from anything. The implications of that understanding are massive. False idea in this stage. I am formless, but other people are still real and separate. There is an end to my formlessness. Stage 7. The belief in becoming the allness. Once we have seen that there are no others and nothing else other than the self, we may find ourselves alternating between feeling totally at home as the self and occasionally moving back into identification with being a person. We'll believe in the reality of the one that is learning to stay as the self more and more of the time. We will believe that it takes some time to get back to the self fully, or to eliminate the remnants of a person. False idea. The illusion of there being anything other than truth, than the self, is real, and it takes some time to completely dissolve it and to be able to consciously stay as the self only. Illusion or untruth must be eliminated, and I can do something to make that happen. So this is a false idea. Illusion or untruth must be eliminated, and I can do something to make that happen. So as much as we've seen in those clear moments, there is only the self, there's nothing other than the self. Immediately then, the next moment, we're back to trying to get rid of our ego, trying to destroy our mind, trying to move away from separation. So to transcend this stage is to see that illusion never really was, and therefore you cannot get rid of it. We're still trying to get rid of it. We haven't seen fully that it never really was. And personally, my own experience, it took a tremendous amount of time to see that that was true. Finally, we will come to see that there is no time, no process, no transcendence or letting go of anything. There is no need for practice to stay as the self, as all is the self. There is only the allness that encompasses all illusion too. It is all the self. At this point, the remainder of the dysfunctional mind will lose its grip, and there will be great peace, love, and joy. So this book is describing transcendence of the mind in these linear stages, but it may not happen like this. You might transcend 2 or 3 of these steps very, very quickly. One particular mind pattern, you may be really at this last stage with it. Another one, you may still be trying to change it out to reality. But just to know what these assumptions are and to be willing to see if they're not true, then it's already started a process of undoing these assumptions. Chapter 4. Practical things to know before you start. In this chapter, we'll discuss a few practical things that are useful to know in this process. Knowing this information will allow you to progress much faster and to use less energy to question why things are happening at each stage. You'll begin to see the patterns coming up easier and to look at them much more effectively. Resistance to change. Firstly, it will help to know that at each stage the mind will put up resistance to try and stop you seeing the truth. You must expect this and know how to deal with it. Our mind is invested in keeping things as they are right now, and to understand why it resists change so much, then we can begin to soften our resistance to the resistance and stop fighting against it. So to just understand that along the pathway, your mind is going to try to stop you because it feels these assumptions are true, and it doesn't see any logical sense at all in letting go of these assumptions. So it's going to offer resistance. And if we just expect that and work with it rather than what most of us do, which is to, the moment there's some turbulent emotion or mind noise comes up, we immediately see that it's a bad thing, that we're doing it wrong. But the fact that resistance is happening should be evidence of your transcendence in progress. And if you can turn your attitude around when these things happen, then you're going to progress so much faster. Nobody has ever just transcended the mind without any resistance at all. It's just not possible. And if you understand your mind is only doing it to try to keep you safe, that's the way your mind feels it can keep you safe, then you're just going to be coming from a different place. You won't be expecting the resistance to stop. It doesn't have to block you. You just say, okay, it's resistance, and I'll carry on anyway. What we call our mind is really a collection of survival strategies, tendencies, and conditioned responses, and other habitual thoughts. Most of the traffic of thought is really monotonous and repetitive, and rarely do we have access to new and unusual thoughts, unless we are actively engaged on a pathway to awakening. We can understand this better by taking a look at what affects and causes this repetitive thought. Over eons of evolution, our animalistic or more primitive nature had to develop the ability to assess the situation carefully and clearly and make a decision almost immediately. So when we were primitive human beings and there was something big and running towards us at great speed on four legs, we had to decide immediately whether to run away from it or towards it. So our mind is still doing that, our egoic sense of self, in a much more sophisticated way, but it's still that very same process going on, survival and all our strategies for that. Our brain had to decide in a few seconds only whether something was a threat, an ally, or perhaps something to try to mate with. Our ability to survive as primitive man often depended on making the correct decision to run or to fight in a few seconds. Those that made the wrong decisions perhaps did not live long enough to pass along those genes. In order to facilitate a speedy decision-making process, our brain categorizes things and labels them and uses these previously determined labels to instantly make a decision about something. We can imagine primitive man being bitten by a snake or a poisonous spider, and for the rest of his life, he would avoid anything that looks like a snake or a spider. You can even recognize this conditioning in our more modern brains. How many of us are scared of spiders for seemingly very little reason? Over the generations, this evolution dysfunction has developed into a highly complex system of analyzing and categorizing not only our physical environment, but also our emotional and mental environment. We instantly label someone as nice because they make us feel happy, and the opposite is also labeled. We also tend to regard anything that makes us feel physical, emotional, or mental pleasure as good, and anything that causes pain as bad. So once these labels are assigned in the mind, most of us never actually look at them again. Now, why is something wanted and something else not wanted? Well, because we believe this thing that's wanted is going to make us feel good, and the thing that's not wanted is going to make us feel bad. Of course, we don't have the space in this book to go through a psychological analysis of the human condition and how it developed, but hopefully you can begin to see that each time we perceive something through our mind and think about it, we are not actually seeing the thing as it is, but only seeing what we think about it after it's been run through our conditioning and our programming. This is so vital to grasp, that when we're looking at the world through mind, we're not actually seeing things as they really are. We're seeing what we think about them and what we feel about them, and our assumptions and these labels are actually what's experienced, rather than the actual thing itself. What's the relevance of all this to our pathway here in this book? Well, we can begin to see that if we begin to try something new and investigate directly the functioning of our mind's patterns, that we may meet with an automatic analysis of new ways of doing things are bad. So I really hit this within myself when I started to really look at this. Why try to change how I've done things, even though it was quite clear in my life that how I was doing things wasn't actually working at all and was actually making things worse. It was bringing me to less peace, and I was feeling more disturbed. And of course, the other assumption of our mind, which is that doing the same things again and again will produce new results. You know, if I keep trying to transcend my mind to get rid of these negative emotions in the same way that I've been trying for years, at some point it's going to work. You know, and that is the definition of insanity according to some definitions, to keep doing the same ineffective thing over and over again unsuccessfully and expecting it to suddenly bring us peace. Of course, neither are ultimately true in every situation, but we can begin to appreciate that such simple ideas as these might have been responsible for the survival of humanity as a primitive species, and as such these ideas are very much embedded in our consciousness and will surface every time we try to change something. So if I have this idea that doing something a particular way has kept me safe, then I'm really going to meet with some resistance when I try to change and do it a different way. We can all immediately recall a time when we tried to change a habit, to stop doing something, or to start doing something, and we were met with great resistance and needed some willpower. You can consider giving up smoking, losing weight, or committing to a new exercise program, and remember how long it takes and conscious effort it took to make a new habit form from an old one. Here in this book, we are changing one simple habit of automatically believing certain thoughts and replacing it with the ability to assess whether the believing these thoughts is still useful to us, rather than blindly believing. If we can understand why this might be perceived as a threat at first to our mind, we can soften the resistance to this process and progress much faster and easier. We are pure awareness itself, the true self of all, but we also always will have a human body and brain with all of its conditioning that has kept us alive and helped us reach this point. Consider where we would be without the simple conditioning of crossing the road when traffic is coming is bad. Don't fight the resistance to change when it appears. Rather, make an effort to understand it, and you are already transcending it. It will also help us to look at how we'll actually experience the transcendence of each mind pattern. At each stage, we can apply what we read in this book to a particular mind pattern, and we'll feel an experiential shift at some point. We'll notice a sense of openness, lightness, relief, or relaxation in the body once we have transcended a certain stage, and the usual way of our minds conclude that this, and the usual way is that our mind concludes that this mind pattern is now completely gone. We may even feel we have let it go or released it. Whilst it's true that we are completely finished with that stage of a particular mind pattern, we must also recognize that we are ready to proceed to the next level of our awakening. The same pattern will seem to reappear from nowhere and present itself exactly as before. This cannot be true, of course, because we are releasing something each time we apply the knowledge in this book, and the fact that the same pattern has resurfaced again must be viewed as a sign of our success in transcendence and not failure. So if I have a sense of unworthiness and I'm feeling not good enough and my whole life is reflecting that back to me, if I come to realize in the first stage that there's nothing I can do in my world to change how I feel, there's nothing I can do out there, I can only begin to work in here, then the sense of unworthiness may disappear for a time. And then when I start to want to transcend the idea that I could ever be unworthy at all, then this sense of unworthiness may come back. If I view that as a failure rather than an opportunity to peel back another layer, then I'm missing a golden opportunity. The evidence of our success, the art of contemplation. In this journey, we're going to move beyond the noise of our mind and live in and as the peace itself. And as such, we must be sure that we do not stop at the wrong place in our transcendence. Transcending the mind is achieved by contemplating a particular thought or belief pattern that we may have and asking openly and honestly if it is actually true. So is it really actually true that there's something I can do to change my outside world that will make me feel better? Is it actually really true that resisting emotions is actually going to make them go away? You know, and most of us have proved that one experientially. But just to contemplate those questions and the ones of the later stages, is it really true, or is ever a separate being, separate to anything? Then to contemplate this is going to undo this seed idea, this seed assumption, which is where the noisy mind sprouts from. When we believe a thought, we are in fact saying, this is true for me. And automatically then, we must experience the effects of that belief. The art of contemplation is to persist in our questioning till we see and feel an experiential shift in our level of consciousness. That means that we must not be fooled and accept a thought answer or an emotional answer. Here we must be wiser than the mind and notice the sequence or levels of answer we will receive. At first, when we contemplate, we must ask an open question, such as, is it really true that? And we'll have a thought answer appear first. Usually we'll receive an answer that goes something like, well, of course it's true, because I keep seeing it happen in my life. As we persist with our sincere and open wish to see if this belief is actually true, and not just presumed to be, we'll begin to receive different thought answers, such as, maybe it's only true because I believed it, or maybe it's never been true and I put my attention on it long enough that it has shown up. As more and more of these new thought answers come, we'll move to the second stage of contemplation, which is usually some sort of emotional answer. We'll begin to feel more positive, optimistic. We'll feel that we have a choice now to change our path. We'll feel happier in general. This is a breakthrough, but we must not stop here. We must continue to ask the questions until not only do we experience a different manifestation, but also an experiential shift in our awareness. It's vital to see that our contemplation is not complete until we have felt ourselves let go of something, released a burden, or we feel lighter or more expansive. Another way to notice that that shift in our level of consciousness has actually occurred will be that the trigger event no longer pushes our buttons and creates an emotional response. The very same event can happen, but we remain at peace inside. If we are to transcend the mind, we cannot accept a mind answer or an emotional answer. Emotions are the result of thoughts we believe are true and are not reliable enough evidence that we have moved beyond a particular mind pattern. More positive emotions are a good sign that we are on the way to letting this go, but not the end goal. What we have just described is how to effectively use your mind to transcend your mind. Mind asks the question, and the final answer is when the question is no longer relevant at all. It'll be so obvious to you that it's not true, nor has it ever been. You believed a thought, so it appeared to be true, and you experienced it. So the final transcendence of a mind pattern is when it stops showing up in your life. And before that, the stage before that is it's showing up in your life, but it just produces no disturbance inside yourself at all. We must come to always and only accept a shift in our level of consciousness as an indication that we have been successful in our contemplation. This is the key to moving beyond the reach of the mind once and for all. Accepting mind answers will only lead to more things that need questioning. Okay. So I'm just going to read chapter 5, which is a stage 1 process, and then I'll take some questions. The chapter 5 is stage 1, or the trigger event. What is a trigger event? We all have experiences in our life where someone says something to us and we feel an immediate and almost involuntary emotional response, and we feel compelled to act in a certain way. We can be triggered by words spoken to us, about us, or even a lack or presence of something. Consider the last time you did not have enough money or time to do what you wanted or needed to do. Remember for a moment the last time you had an argument with your partner. As humans, most of us live a life where we feel pulled around by life and are bound to ride the waves of mental and emotional stress caused by these trigger events. We may even find once a trigger event has gone that we still cannot leave the situation, and thoughts are still raging like a storm happening inside our head. So even once the thing has disappeared, the person we had an argument with has gone out of our experience, most of us are still thinking about the effect of that. Most of us are still experiencing the effect of something that happened years ago, even. Or the converse of this, we can be fearing something that may happen years from now, or even months from now. Most of us have no choice but to be triggered and have the same involuntary response or strong emotion, stress, and continue the loop over and over. Even when we might be aware that we're being triggered, we have no idea how to break that cycle. We'll find ourselves hurting others with our words and actions that come from a highly emotionalized place, but are unable to stop it. We can feel like a puppet on a string, and most of humanity has only one option to try to break free, and that is to try to change or stop the trigger itself. We may talk to the person that upset us, or try to reason with them, avoid them, or many other actions. Transcending the false idea. The way to transcend these trigger moments and gain back a sense of choice as to how we react to other people and events is simply to notice that we have a choice. We may not have yet realized that the way we have been trying to fix these situations is not working, and all our efforts to make something change to make us happier can only work temporarily at best, if at all. So I may get that person that's upsetting me to disappear from my life, to apologize to me, to even change. They might become a better person, but it's only going to show up with another person if this pattern is still in place. It's got to keep reflecting in my outside world unless I've undone the ideas that are behind it. We must realize that these trigger events and the action we take to get rid of them is not effective, because we cannot make someone change or cause something to shift in our outside world simply by effort alone. The false idea in this stage is, I can change the outside world to get what I want and to make me feel better. So if you've ever tried this at all, you find it wholly unsuccessful, and even if it is, it happens temporarily at best. This is simply not true. We must learn to work on an inner level to cause lasting change. We must be able to accept that these things are happening because we're believing something that is not true. Only by accepting that this is not true can we retrain ourselves to look inwards for the answer that we seek. We can finally come to see that the world out there is only a reflection of our inner level of consciousness in each area. We may have a lower insight level for some areas of our life than others, and so we may be relaxed and open around finances with an easy come, easy go attitude. But when it comes to romance, we may still believe that we have to go through many heartbreaks to find our soulmate. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for now. Like I said, I'm not going to read through all the examples that are there because it'd be too time consuming. Before I take Steve's question, I have a question that was sent into the Facebook page, which I'm going to read out first. If anybody else would like to ask a question as well, you can click on participants and click the blue hand to raise your hand, and it'll let me know that you're waiting to ask a question. Okay. So this question was sent into the Facebook page, and it's in response to something that was posted there that I'd written. So I'll read what I've written first very quickly so that the question makes sense. I'd written, you are already the beautiful mystery that is the self. You are already all that you could ever hope to be or become. The sages have declared this throughout all time. So why are you not living as a conscious example of that total tranquility? Isn't it just because your radiance is trying to shine through a few thoughts that seem to diminish your light and cause suffering? Your radiance takes the shape of whatever thought you feel is true, and you experience it. Have you really been seeking for so many years, trying to get home? Or are you already the great self experiencing the thought, I must find my way home, over and over? Are you experiencing the idea, I am not worthy of enlightenment, more than actual enlightenment? Are you still shining your light through the idea, waking up is hard, takes a long time, and not many get there? Hasn't humanity been experiencing that one collectively for millennia? And what happens when you begin to question even your experience of not being the self? What happens in your life when you begin to feel nothing can stop you because you are already that? How will your whole experience change when you stop projecting through any thoughts? Then only your pure light will shine unrestricted. Your radiance will warm everyone that bathes in it, and your love will embrace all that is. You'll finally be done experiencing through thought and will begin to experience yourself. So the question that came in regard to that is, questioner says, I resonate so much with this, have been in paragraphs 1 and 2 forever and ever. I hear the truth in paragraph 3, yearn for it so, but now feel tired and exhausted trying to step out. How do I step out, please? I cannot change the environment I find myself in. So how do I relinquish the thought through which I keep experiencing the same old hard to breathe, suffocating stuff? How do I live in the love that I already am? Please shine the light and help me see clearly this shadow. Light the way out. Thank you. So that's a really intelligent question, isn't it? To ask, I know that I'm suffering. I know that what I'm doing isn't working. How do I come out of it? To me, that's the height of wisdom, is to be able to look at the methods that we're applying to see why we're suffering, and to see actually if they're working or not. And when his questioner has looked at that, there's a sense that it's not working, they're still suffering. So how to come out of this is to question if it's true even that you have to come out of this. If I were to sit with that person and talk to them and ask them what evidence they can give me that they're suffering and that they have to come out of it, the only thing they could point to would be their thoughts, their emotions, and their experience as evidence that they are the ones suffering and they have to come out of it. This is so taken for granted by all of us, that obviously I feel bad, I'm experiencing suffering, my life isn't the way I want it to be, how do I change it? So that very assumption is based on an idea that I am the one that's got to change something. And instead, a clearer seeing can happen, which can take us out of it automatically. A seeing that maybe there is nothing I can do to change this. And also, maybe there's nothing I need to do to change this. To deeply question that assumption that there's something I have to do or be or become to free myself of suffering is going to bring you out of it immediately. Just this idea believed that there's something wrong with us or something we haven't fully become yet, it is causing untold suffering for most of humanity, and definitely most spiritual seekers. So what if you question even this idea that you have to come out of it? Even though it's happening right now in your experience, you can still question it. Even though you still seem to be suffering right now, you can question, what happens if I don't believe I have to come out of it? If our experience has taught us anything as students of truth, it's that trying hard to come out of suffering actually makes it worse. It's like getting caught in a spider's web, and the more you try to get out of it, the stickier it gets and the more wrapped up in it you get. So amazing as it may seem, that to question what is actually what we're convinced of, that we're suffering and we have to come out. If we're willing just for a second to challenge that assumption, we might come to see that we've been experiencing that particular assumption. I'm already the great silence. I'm already completely peaceful. But some negative emotion arises and some experience doesn't go my way. And the assumption is that I'm suffering and I have to come out of it. It's the core and the root of all suffering in that. There is nothing you can do to bring yourself out of suffering because you are already the self. And if you really sort of open up for a second and be willing to question, what if I'm dreaming actually that I'm suffering? Although it feels extremely real when it's happening, I really do remember that. If I'm willing to question even for a second that this might not be the real me that's asking this question even, isn't there a greater version of me that's already free that I can experience right now if I'm willing just for a second to question even that assumption, how to come out of it. Find out if it's your job to come out of it. Maybe that very idea is causing all this pain, that something has to happen or something has to change, or that negative emotions have to stop, or your world has to look more enlightened before you believe you're there. So question that one assumption and hopefully it'll make a massive difference. Well, it definitely make a massive difference. I remember being very convinced that I was the one that had to come out of it. And I found out amazingly, even that wasn't true. Lovely. So we'll go to Steve with your question when you're ready.
Oh, yeah.
Hiya.
You know, right, yeah. There's a lot of stuff in that, unfamiliar. A lot of familiar, but unfamiliar. So I never looked at that book at all. So I'll have to watch all this again. But you didn't mention about triggers and how we react to them. And I recognise it is me now. I can see. I've sort of known for a long time. I go to a lot of meetings, and I don't choose which meeting I went to. There'd be somebody to wind me up. You know what I mean? It's like the old saying: "There's always one." You know.
Different bodies, but same. It's like same person keeps showing up in my life in different bodies. Yeah, you know.
It's still going on. I'm still trying to look. But I think it comes down to this separation thing which you were talking about, and still believing that I'm separate. And I'm asking the question, is it really true I'm separate? Why do I persist in believing that it's separate? So that's my new question at the moment, along with, am I really safe? So I think that's on the right track, isn't it? Yeah, all right.
Yeah, if you can see the same pattern showing up, no matter what you try to do to your outside world, you might even try to make it right with that person. You might never see them again. It might, whatever the outcome of that, it's got to keep showing up. If the seed thought is there, it's got to keep reflecting in your outside world. So
because there's someone right from the far past, and he keeps cropping up in my mind. I think, well, how will I cope with him? And it's still there. I think, look at that. Mm-hmm. So is this what we talk about? This if I see him as me, how can I fall out with him? How can I, you know? And so I'm sort of working on that.
If you don't, if you can recognize that what you've been trying to do to fix the problem isn't working, then isn't working consistently, and that the same pattern keeps showing up in other areas, then you can begin to see there must be a different way, and then okay, it must be something reflecting from inside me that I'm not conscious of completely, and maybe it's this idea that I'm separate to this other being that's the root of the issue, because and our mind doesn't want to look at this, because it says if I realize this annoying, irritating, disturbing person is me, then they're going to come closer to me. But it's actually the opposite, because we're finally empowered from the real place where there isn't any separation, and our whole experience has to change to reflect that coming from truth. Right now, your experience may be reflecting back to you that there's lots of other beings that you can't control, and you don't feel safe, or whatever way it's playing out for, you know.
I'm totally backing off. I'm thinking, I won't even get involved because they're winding me up. I'm just backing off. But in a sense that, well, it's maybe sensible, but it isn't solving the problem.
Yeah.
Like you say.
And none of this, these steps in transcendence says you're going to become a doormat. You know, somebody's treating you badly, you're still going to say what you need to say and stand up for yourself.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
But only doing that is not an effective long-term thing, is it? And that's what finally we realised. There must be also something in here to look at.
Someone else will pop up and have to have an argument with them again, what to front them up. You don't want to carry on fronting people up.
So you can see the false idea from stage 1 here playing out very literally. There's something I can do to change my outside world to make me happier, you know, and it's just, it doesn't work that way, does it? And we might be quite far advanced along our path, and at some point we'll realise I'm still trying to change my experience there with this person or that thing, or
very subtle, but yeah, it goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you can see it, you can come out of it. You're already coming out of it, aren't you?
Yeah, totally. Okay.
And we stop banging our head against the same wall and getting the same result.
Big dent in me wall, there, Joey.
Yeah, wonderful.
There's one more. Can I have a time? Yeah. We talked a week or two ago, I can't remember when it was, about being aware when you're asleep. Is that the right way to put it?
Yeah.
And I've sort of looked at it, and I still can't. It leads me to be when body dies, the awareness is still there, but the body's gone. But is there anything there aware of it? This is what I don't. Is there some sort of personality there that's aware, that's still here when the body dies, or is it just blank?
What's your experience in deep sleep? Is there a personality there then?
Nothing at all.
There must be something there. Something is there.
Well, yeah, but I'm not aware of it, am I? That's what I'm asking.
Well, you're aware that there was no experience in deep sleep.
That's afterwards, isn't it? That's memory, that, isn't it?
Well, you use the body to tell me that now, but you must have been aware during the night that there was no sense of time or space or world or my body or any of it. It was all gone, wasn't it? My relationships, everything during the night was gone.
Yeah.
You need the body to verbalize that or think about it. You need the waking state afterwards, but the actual seeing of it is happening during. There's something aware even in the deep sleep state. Something's watching. Awareness is watching. No sense of time. Like right now, it's watching the sense of time passing. It's watching the sense of a body, the sense of an interaction going on. The same awareness is still present when the waking state has gone.
There's some sort of personality, something's attached to that. That's what I'm trying to say. The body is attached to that. I find it difficult to understand that part of the body. Consciousness does not need the body to survive. That's
right. Is that what you're asking for help with then?
I think, yeah. Well, you're laughing at.
Sometimes. Well, sometimes it's a little challenging to get to the root of a question. So the idea is that if there is an idea that awareness needs the body in some way, then there's going to be fear that when the body goes, awareness will be either gone or diminished. So it's worthwhile investigating this one and really coming to understand. So which is here first, the awareness or the body? That's the question that's going to bring. Can the body appear without the contextual field in which it appears? Can the body be born without this now moment, this present moment in which it's born? Which must be here first, the intangible you or the tangible you? There's something to really take in and consider. Because if we can be clear, if you can prove to yourself in your experience that the awareness, the intangible, insubstantial you, must be here first before the body, then there's going to be a realization that comes with that, that awareness doesn't need the body at all. It can use it, enjoys using it, but it's not dependent or reliable on it at all. It's here effortlessly all by itself, and it's not impacted when the body goes. So spend some time looking at that question, you know, which is here first, the intangible me or the tangible, the awareness or the body, the sense of now or the body which appears in the now, a sense of being here, of being, presence, whatever you want to call it. Can that exist without a body? And can the body exist without the space that it appears in? That question is going to lead you to a massive seeing.
I'll have to have a look at this, yeah. Which I do look at. I do. See, but I think, well, my first memory was about 3 years old. And that's the first time I can imagine, that awareness for that.
Memory is in thought.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. So what was there before thought? Something to ponder, something to think about, and just to look at you.
I'll go there. Okay.
Yeah. Lovely.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Sergio?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. I'd like to know what happens or how to handle when an action from somebody else, particularly at work or in the streets, triggers something inside. How to handle that? So
do you mean an emotional response, or?
Yes, it's like somebody at work, someone says something that you don't agree with, and it bursts the emotion inside of me, the anger, the dislike,
Okay.
How do you handle that?
If you look at what's actually happening, if you break that down and actually look at what the process is that's occurring, it'll give you the understanding to be free of it. So most of us just go with the idea that that person said something that upset me. You know, that's the assumption that we all believe deeply and therefore experience. But that same person could say the same thing to somebody else, and they might even agree with them. They might not be affected by it at all. And sometimes even ourselves, we might not be affected by the same words from the same person. So it can't really be true that that person is saying something to me and that upsets me. There must be something deeper going on inside. If we look at it, maybe what this person is saying is challenging some ideas I have, is confronting some ideas I have about myself or about this person. Let's say I really feel I'm a good person, and somebody says something very critical and mean about me. That's going to really come up against my own ideas about myself and cause me to feel bad. So is it, and conversely as well, if I really feel I'm a bad person and somebody says something really nice about me, that's also going to make me, cringe. So is it really what they're saying or doing that's impacting me? Or is it that those thoughts, what they've said, is affecting my projections about myself, what I think about myself? Or, if they said something that I thought was out of character for them, if they're generally a nice person, and they say something mean or rude, that would upset me, but it would really upset my projections about that person, that they're a nice person, that I know they're generally very good and kind. So it's only ever disturbing our ideas about them or ourselves or the world. So when you really sort of take this on board, you can really begin to see that we're only ever suffering from our ideas being disturbed and not the actual person out there. And like I said before, it doesn't mean that you're going to somebody's being rude to you, you're going to just say, okay, fine. You might say, look, please don't speak to me like that. But if you can see that inside there's some idea that's being protected, that this situation has really challenged, then if I believe the world is a safe and happy place and something really negative happens, as we've seen in the media lately, that's going to challenge my assumptions. If I believe the world's a terrible place and horrible things are happening, I'm also going to be challenged by some really kind things happening. So my thoughts are what are being challenged, and I can come to peace by recognizing maybe that thought that I feel isn't true. Maybe I'm sure this person isn't a nice person, or maybe I'm sure they are a nice person. Maybe I'm sure I'm a good person or I'm not a good person. Maybe none of that is true. Absolutely. You know, maybe you're only a good person in relation to what I think about you, or it's all quite a flimsy way of perceiving the world, isn't it?
So then, in that event or case, what would be the right question to ask internally?
Yeah, if you look at what is it that this really upsets inside, what is it that, what button has been pushed, and you can tell by which emotion comes up. If it's a sense of anger, it's usually some sense of injustice or feeling blocked and not being able to get what you want. Even if what you want is the world to be a better place, and you feel something out there is happening that's reflecting that you can't get that, there's going to be a sense of anger and injustice in that. Or if it's sadness, you know, sadness is saying I've lost something that I need to be happy. If it's unworthiness, something out there may make us feel that we're not good enough, challenge that idea that I'm not good enough. So the question can be, which assumption is it that, you know, this, which assumption about myself or the world am I holding here that may not be true? And just to ask that question, you'll be shown some idea that we've perhaps quite deeply believed and not been able to see that we're believing it until somebody or something challenges it. And that's sometimes why we need, we grow much faster in our awakening through relationships and challenges like this, because we can feel, every human being starts off believing that how I see the world is true, how I see myself is true, how I feel about everything is what is actually real. And the more willing we are to question those things we believe about ourselves or life, the more peace we're going to feel. Because then if I'm willing to question my own assumptions about myself or everyone else, maybe nobody is the way I've seen them. Maybe the world isn't the way I've seen it. Maybe I'm not at all the way I thought I was. And there's nothing that can push those buttons where we still, you know, this is my belief and I want to hold on to it. Just to ask to be shown what thought it is. It'll come. It's very good questions, yeah. Fantastic. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you. Same here.
Okay. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Or are we all done for today? Okay, we will leave it there then for today. Oh, whoop-de-doo, very quickly, whoop-de-doo.
Yeah, sorry, it's Caroline.
Hi.
Hello, Helen. I just wanted to ask a quick question. If something is a karmic thing, something that you have been carrying with you for previous lives, I assume that that's what it is. How long will it take longer than to get through that?
Oh, that's
because
a good
it's
question.
coming up much stronger than anything else.
Everything is karmic. Everything that we're experiencing now is what we've carried from a previous lifetime. So everything we're experiencing, if we're working on what we're experiencing right now, we're also transcending past life karma at the same time. It's the same thing. So we've come into this lifetime with these beliefs about ourselves or the world, or God, whatever our beliefs are. I'm not safe, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, whatever they are. And they have to be playing out in our outer world. So we're all kind of walking around displaying all our past life karma to everyone in a way. Luckily, everyone's doing the same thing, so they don't really see. But, you know, if you were to take a look at my life before, it'd be quite easy to see what I feel about myself. So the two are the same. It's got to be, if it's inside me, it's got to be experienced out there. So it's never only our experience or only our karma. They are the same thing. That's why when you transcend these things in this lifetime, they're gone forever, you know, completely, which is a very good thing.
Yeah. Oh, there's hope then.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Just because we've carried it for many, many lifetimes doesn't mean it's any harder to transcend. That's another assumption that a lot of us struggle with. You know, well, I've had this thing for, I remember many lives of having this unworthiness or something, you know, and it's going to take a long time to get rid of. But it's still just the same thought believed. And actually, in this particular body situation now, right now, it's the best, clearest chance ever to let it go.
Yeah, I feel like that. I feel that in some way, that it is just presenting me so in my face that I have to look at it.
Yeah, it was the same for me. These things got so loud and so much in my face, as you said, and they were so in contrast with the peace I was increasingly feeling. It was like, okay, let me look at this. Let me really, let's get this sorted, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much and namaste.